Where do we stand in the Middle East?
Well, our government tells us that we stand with an even-handed posture, which to me means we're standing on our head because it's all mixed up. Even-handed means both sides have kind of equal rights, and that certainly isn't true in the Middle East. The Egyptians have sworn to destroy Israel and to drive the Jews into the sea, whereas Israel, a member of the United Nations, asks only what is its right to live freely, independently, behind recognized and secure frontiers. And it seems to me the United States should stand strongly with Israel, for that is the right of every member of the United Nations. Furthermore, Israel is a democratic and Western-oriented country, the kind that we ought to be supporting, and we're really not, particularly when it's under very severe attack from the Soviet Union, which is sending arms to its enemies to destroy it. Now, in 25 years as a reporter around the world, I've seen country after country scream for American help, and all they have to do is to mention the magic word Soviet Union. We've helped the Greeks and the Turks. We've sent Marines into Lebanon. We've sent Marines into Santo Domingo. We've sent how many of our young men to fight and die in Vietnam in the name of stopping communist and Russian advances. Why do we not stand with Israel?
When we follow a course designed as it is that precipitates the kind of resentment and defiance of law and order, and in a sense sanctioned by our leadership, you find various dissident groups taking the law into their own hands and acting on their own. This is the same thing that was true in the days of the heyday of the Ku Klux Klan, the black shirts and the red shirts in this country, where there was some unspoken sanction for their actions. So they took the law into their own hands. When our governor says that he doesn't have an idea of what his role is as leader of this state, it is certainly disquieting and should be alarming to all of our Texas citizens. To whom should we look for leadership if our governor doesn't know what he's supposed to do? The state gladly added up the funds year after year to bus Negroes past 2 and 3 white schools to keep them out of quality schools. They did it for more than 100 years. Now, because it says that some kids who are not classified as minorities are going to be bused to bring about integration and a balance in the school system, it becomes criminal and immoral. The same leaders who advocated segregation then and busing then are the ones who are denouncing it now.
Charlotte, what happened this morning?
Well, when I drove up outside, I noticed a little guy sitting outside by the curb, and I just went ahead and drove in, and when I stopped my car, well, he opened the door and got in with me, and he stuck a gun in my side, and he said, "You just be calm and go inside and take out all the money you got and put it in a bag." He said, "Do what I tell you and nobody will get hurt." So I came inside and put the money in a little bag, and he shut me up in the back room back there until he looked outside and didn't see anybody, so then he left.
What about the Vietnam situation? Or do you feel that we're getting out of there fast enough, or do you feel that all the troops should come home at one time?
Well, you can't bring all the troops home at one time. That's logistically impossible. But I think it is quite easy to arrange an orderly and an honorable withdrawal from Vietnam by withdrawing 50,000 troops a month. And in 9 months, why, they'll all be out. Now, that's not cutting and running. That's almost a year's time. Seems to me reasonable, and it seems to me within the terms of what we set out to do. Our government keeps telling us we have to maintain a commitment in Vietnam, and it seems that the time has come when we could say quite truly and honorably that we have fulfilled our commitment. After all, no commitment is forever, and we took a commitment 5 years ago, in 1965, when we sent in our first combat troops to help the South Vietnamese resist the communist attack.
Well, it's a long, tough job. It'll take a minimum of 5 years and up to maybe 10 years. We'll never completely eliminate it, but we'll break the terrific national organization it has now and its grip upon the law enforcement processes in some of the big cities.
How about Dallas? How does Dallas stand on the list of organized crime?
Well, I really can't comment on Dallas. It's a clean city. It has been. It's not anywhere close to the top of our priority list.
Mr. Wilson, what steps is the federal government taking against organized crime?
Well, we are expanding the investigatory agencies first, like the FBI, the law enforcement part of the Internal Revenue Service, the Secret Service, the Security and Exchange Commission. Many of the different investigatory agencies are receiving large increases in their budgets for their investigatory forces. We're expanding the strike force concept, both as to its mission and its utility and in number. We now have 11 in operation. We expect to have 2 more in the next several months, and by the end of the next fiscal year, we should have at least 20 in operation.
Oh, I think it is very difficult to say just what strides black and whites have made during that period of time, because I have seen this year that Nixon has been in as a kind of moving away between black and whites, not of a coming together period as such. As you might know, I have read, and I know this to be a fact, that the Negro populace is not necessarily impressed with Nixon and his administration at all. They feel very much on the outside of it, and that Nixon is not a friend of the black man. And as far as really being able to, and using Nixon's theme, be together or move together, that has been fine for the white populace, but the Negroes, the blacks as a whole, are still on the outside as far as the Nixon administration is concerned. And this is a feeling that still exists. And over the past year, there hasn't been that much to change the thoughts and feelings of the people.
Well, my first reaction is one of disappointment. The legislature, during the regular session and the special tax sessions, appropriated funds for the medical schools at Lubbock and at Houston on the basis that these funds were needed. It was represented to us that these were funds necessary in order for the schedule of opening and planning and construction and teachers and all be complied with. Now, if this money was not needed, then it was certainly misrepresented to us when we passed an appropriations bill and a tax bill. The welfare problem needs to be solved, and I think the best way to solve it is to call the legislature back in special session to appropriate sufficient funds that would prevent any reduction in the payments.
You, as a senator, cannot call a special session, of course, or cause one to be called. What can you do to carry out what you think is the proper course in this measure?
Well, the only thing that I could do is to urge the governor, as I already have, to reconsider his position and call a special session. We can also, as senators and legislators, press for an Attorney General's opinion about the legality of this kind of a transfer. We led to believe that under the Constitution of the state of Texas, you appropriate money 1/12 at a time, and for each month of any given year. So we could press for an Attorney General's opinion on the legality of this.
Do you have intention of seeking that redress?
Well, the Attorney General only issues opinions to the chairman of standing committees of the Senate and to the Lieutenant Governor. And there are other persons who are designated in the law as persons who can request the Attorney General's opinion. I have the feeling that this request will be made, and I will join in with any chairman of any committee to seek such a request.
Well, I'd have to agree that the Commission does provide a vehicle through which people who are aggrieved, whether they're minority people or anybody else, but who feel they have grievances, can express those and can be heard. Their expressions can be heard. Now, it needs to be made very clear, on the other hand, that the Commission has never taken any position as a commission. It can't be responsible, of course, for every word which is said by every member on the commission. Any commission member is free to speak his mind, and any person from the citizenry who wants to come to the commission is free to do so. But the commission itself, in terms of any actions or judgments which it has made, has never made any judgment of a critical nature concerning the police department.
President Cunningham told him yesterday that after the CRC runs an article in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram apologizing for the criticism and criticizing and condemning the police department, which they wrongly have, then we will consider a meeting with them. Further stated that the statements made by the Reverend Washington that made at a meeting Tuesday about the Commission's effect on community and police relations were untrue. Mr. Washington says that his group had taken no action condemning or criticizing the police department, and he was wrong there. He's already done it several times in the paper.
Well, I'm sure it's going to help in the sense of focusing attention and funds. I think the main problem with it is how it's going to be administered and through what channels. When we were working on the Safe Streets Act in the Johnson administration, its proposal was to permit the monies to go to the cities and to metropolitan areas. After all, that's where the crime is, that's where the problem of building up our police, of giving them the proper salaries, of getting the proper technological background for them lies. Under the present administration, however, not only is the overtone more of a repressive one rather than of a constructive one in terms of the social programs that underlie the causes of crime, but in the administration of the details of the crime, the money is being given to the states. I don't know what the situation is in Texas, but in other states, the result has been that the governors have built up their whole layer of bureaucracy. Much of the money is being dissipated in salaries for administrators, and the concentration is not where the crime is, and not in coping with the crime, but in other parts of the state and for other uses.
Is, for instance, Dallas City and County, which have formed an organization, a criminal justice council, to go down and ask for this money, do you think that they are going to have a rough time, even though they have organized in an area-wide group?
Well, I certainly wish them the best of luck. Judging from the experiences elsewhere in the country, they will not get as much as they think they need, and as they do need, in fact, in coping with the criminal problem.
No, I wouldn't say so. We have 18 million people altogether in South Africa, and the police force, I can't think of the exact number now, but the police force is less than that of New York City alone. Half of our police force are also Bantu, black people, black persons. I wouldn't call it a police state. See less police in South Africa than you do in any American city.
We were talking before the interview began, and you were telling me that the concept of crime is quite different there than it is here. That what might be a crime here in the United States, for instance, striking my wife, would be a crime, but it would not necessarily be so in South Africa.
I've got to, set you straight on that point. Not as far as this difference would exist with your black people in South Africa, not with the white people. If I hit my wife, I'd probably get the same medicine you would. No, it affects your Bantu cultures, your black cultures. To a Bantu man, a wife is his belonging. She belongs to him. And their law more or less goes, if I can hit my dog, I can hit my wife. So you usually find yourself more or less at odds, where the Roman Dutch law, which is the legal system in South Africa, has to face certain attitudes of tribal law and adapt more or less. In other words, we have to take into consideration certain things that the Bantu believe in.
Why do you consider it to be a bad regulation? What is the union's cause in this?
Well, let's be very careful to begin with that we are hardly asking that the flag or the pledge be removed from the public schools. We are simply asking that the pledge not be mandatory. We feel that this makes excellent psychological and constitutional sense, that we cannot find how any person can attach any meaning to a pledge when it's recited in a stimulus response mandatory fashion. We feel that this is not true patriotism, this is rote recitation.
The Dallas, Texas branch of the National Alliance of Postal and Federal Employees, whose membership approaches 1,000 postal and federal workers, has adopted resolutions favoring recent decisions of our National Executive Board. One such decision calls for 50,000 postal and federal workers to take part in a gigantic march on Washington to dramatize our dissatisfaction if we get no relief from Executive Order 11491 as it now stands. We also support our National Executive Board in its authorization of our national president, Ashby G. Smith, to call a nationwide strike. We feel that ours is a just cause, and we intend to follow the mandates of our national leadership through active participation if called upon to do so.
Well, we're going to discuss with the Highway Commission what future role the Texas Turnpike Authority can play in the transportation needs of our state. Now, we've discussed a number of possible projects. All of this is in the idea stage. We haven't advanced any to the point of feasibility studies or anything of that sort. As a matter of fact, we wouldn't even consider a feasibility study until and unless the Highway Department should give us its full consent and approval. There have been discussions about another Dallas-Fort Worth facility because of the tremendous success of the present facility. There have been discussions about a turnpike, a toll facility linking Fort Worth and Houston via Interstate 45. There have been discussions about the possible need for turnpike facilities in other urban areas of the state, and I include Houston specifically. So we don't have any concrete plans at the moment. We are going to explore with the Highway Commission and see if there is a role for us to play.
Running, trying to take some of the votes.
Do you have a complainant, and if not, what prompted the action by the union?
No, we do not have a complainant. However, we did have two requests by high school students who happened to be reading through the regulation handbook, and they questioned the validity of this regulation. We feel that not having a warm complainant is no particular rationale for keeping a bad regulation on the book.